Canadians are amazingly proud of household ownership, but with the prices of houses these days, who can afford to get into the marketplace? Well, the federal government decided to do something about that. They created the First Home Savings Account, FHSA. It's kind of a tax deal. It's kind of an investment deal. So we've got two guys. Andrew Kirkland is going to join us. He's the president of Justwealth, and James Gautier is the chief investment officer. And he'll join us right after this break. Andrew, James, great to see you two guys.
Great to see you as well, Pat.
Okay, Andrew, I'm going to start with you because I need to know what an FHSA actually is.
All right. Well, thanks, Pat. Yeah, it's another acronym that we have now within the investment industry, which hopefully doesn't confuse too many people, but we have a lot of them. But anyways, the FHSA stands for First Home Savings Account. Okay, and basically what it is, it's an investment account or just a savings account that can be utilized to help people and help investors save and ultimately purchase a qualifying home, right? And specifically their first home. The government has a little bit of an issue with home affordability in this country. So they recently came out, and one of the levers they're pulling on or allowing people to do is to open what's called an FHSA and invest money in that investment account in a tax efficient manner that is combining some of the benefits of an RSP with some of the benefits of a tax-free savings account to use those proceeds towards the purchase of the primary objective being purchasing of a home.
Let's run the numbers then. It's $8,000 limit a year, correct? And that's tax deductible?
Yeah, that is correct. So the FHSA was started in 2023. Okay, so in April of this year, the government passed into law that you could open up an FHSA.
I know, I do the same thing, Andrew. Trust me, it's a tongue twister.
Yeah, no, it doesn't come off as smoothly. It will as more time passes. But yeah, so basically the way it works, this year, an investor could open up an FHSA and put in $8,000 into that account. Now, that contribution is going to function very similar to how a contribution would work within an RSP account. So you can reduce your taxable income by the amount of money you contribute into that FHSA. Now, say, for example, you do not want to use that contribution to reduce your taxable income in this particular year. You do not necessarily have to. You can use that contribution receipt to bring down your taxable income in future years. So you don't have to necessarily do that. It's very similar to an RSP, right? So you put the money in, you get a tax deduction off your income for that particular or any year that you would like.
Right. Okay. So now you've got it, the $8,000 invested on a per annum basis, making that assumption. It grows. You're successful in your investing. Now, when it comes out, it has to be used for a house or not?
So in order for it to function, like going in, getting the deduction and coming out tax-free, in order for it to come out tax-free, it has to be used towards the purchase of a qualifying home. Okay, so a first-time home buyer, that's what makes it a qualifying purchase and a qualifying home is if you qualify to be a first-time home buyer. So in that scenario, the money and that in perfect world, that's the way this all structures. So the money goes in, you get a taxable deduction on your income, money comes out, and you don't have to pay taxes on that. Very much like it's combining the benefits from a tax perspective, like an RSP on the way in and a tax-free savings account on the way out.
Wow, that's cool. Give me a guess. If you were successful in your investing, how much money could you actually contribute? Because I saw a study recently where it would take you, 2.5 years if you're buying a house in Winnipeg, but it would take you 29 years if you're buying a house in Vancouver for the average person.
Yes. Yeah. Like affordability of homes ranges across the country. Obviously in Greater Toronto area or Greater Vancouver area, Victoria, you're going to need more money to get into the housing market just because of the sheer prices. But when you look at an FHSA, and that I would see that this is a potential lever that you could pull on in helping towards the purchase of a home and using towards a home down payment or whatever the such. So $8,000 each year for 5 years is the contribution limit. $8,000 is an annual limit. The $40,000 is a lifetime limit. So, presumably there's maybe a couple, they have $40,000 each. They put in $8,000 for 5 years. Each of them, collectively they have $80,000 together, plus any growth on that money. And that can change based on, if you're investing in an exchange traded fund portfolio, a stock, a bond, mutual fund, savings account at the bank. It really depends on which account, which investment vehicle you're going to proceed with for that FHSA. But that's one lever, like I mentioned, that you could potentially utilize to purchase a home. You could also combine other levers. So as an example, we still have the home buyer's plan withdrawal on an RSP account. So that's another $35,000 that somebody could potentially pull out of their RSP tax-free, almost like a loan, and then you'd have to repay a portion of that $35,000 back over a 15-year period. So that's one lever, and then there's other levers like a tax-free savings account. So, theoretically, if somebody was disciplined and had the wherewithal to actually make those investments and make those contributions into those account types, you could over a 8 to 10 year period, you're kind of looking at a couple $100,000 potentially, depending on which rate of return you're getting on your investments or whatever vehicle that you are investing in. But yeah, that can certainly go a long way in helping people save for the purchase of a home. It doesn't really do anything to the prices of homes. Those can fluctuate based on the particular market that you're buying a home in or other factors. But yeah, certainly having that little pot of money that you've saved for could definitely helpful when you ultimately do make that decision to purchase a home.
So you've got all kinds of levers, and I guess it comes down to your situation, which one you pick. But are there any circumstances where you wouldn't qualify for a first home savings account? So, for instance, I've never owned my own home. I always put it in my wife's name. So I would be a candidate, if you would, for a first home savings account. Or would I? I don't know.
So that's a great question. And so there's a couple of factors. One, the ability to be able to open an FHSA is determined by certain age requirements, right? So you have to be the age of majority in the province you live, 18, 19 years old, and you cannot be older than 71 in the year that you open up an FHSA. So that kind of puts that restriction on age. Now, in your scenario, in the question that you asked, there's a lot of people who are trying to get understandings on this because everyone's situation is different, right? And we live in a very big country and there's a lot of different situations. But in your scenario where, say, for example, Pat, your wife owns the 100% of your home that you live in, and you have no ownership stake in that home, because you live in a home and your spouse owns it, you would not be eligible to open up an FHSA in this scenario. Now, say, for example, you were, living separately, okay? And this is maybe for somebody who is not yet in a relationship. So the main thing is at the time of you opening up an FHSA is, do you qualify? And that's basically your age, and also, have you been a homeowner in this calendar year, or the 4 previous calendar years? If those 2 restrictions are met, yes, you can open up an FHSA. As far as living with a spouse and in this particular year you live with that spouse and they own a home, no, because the spousal unit owns a home, so you would not be eligible to open up an FHSA.
Okay, then go to the other end of the spectrum. Let's say I wanted to help my grandkids buy their homes because it's getting too expensive and I have the cash to do that. Can an FHSA be useful?
Very much so. Yeah. So if this is kind of intergenerational wealth planning avenue, right? So if a parent, grandparent and parent wants to potentially help out the next generation, they have the ability to gift that money to that next generation, and then that grandchild or child would be able to open an FHSA if they qualify. And based on those restrictions that we talked about before, if they qualify, they could open an FHSA in their name and then use the proceeds that was gifted to them to invest within an FHSA. So yeah, if a family has the ability, and the net worth to make that type of decision and make that type of gift, they can do that, and it could potentially help out a younger family getting started and going into the housing market.
There are a lot of moving parts, though, as you point out, whether it's registered retirement savings accounts, tax-free savings accounts, now the first home savings account. How should an average investor approach these products and how they all mix?
Yeah, so, well, I think the first thing is if your primary objective is to purchase a home with the money you're looking to invest, an FHSA is a great spot to look, and probably should be the number one investment account that you look at when if you know and you qualify and you're certain you're going to the main objective for those proceeds that you're looking to invest is for the purchase of a home, a first time home. An FHSA makes a lot of sense. When it comes to the potential other levers like a tax-free savings account and an RSP, those they have different factors that could potentially sway one person from investing in a TFSA over an RSP or vice versa, and it really comes down to the tax situation that someone may be in that particular year that they make that contribution. And quick math is if you think that your taxable income is going to be higher this year than it is in the future or retirement, put the money in the RSP, get it taxed right now. Don't pay any tax on it now, and then pay tax later on. Whereas if it's switched and you think your taxable income is going to go up in the future, it may make more sense to put the money into a tax-free savings account, basically pay the taxes now, and then later at a later date take it tax-free. But those are all dependent on many factors, and in a lot of cases, it's personalized to your situation as to which account type do you want to utilize for that reason. It's always advisable to speak with your accountant, or your financial advisor, and they can kind of tell you what's going on with the situation in your current tax situation.
Okay, so now let's turn our attention to the actual investments of these FHSAs. And James, you're the expert in this space. What would you actually do with those funds?
Well, it depends on the outlook for each investor. So everybody probably has a different timeline or objective or level of certainty around when they're going to use the proceeds. So someone with a very short-term time horizon, perhaps they've already put a down payment on a house and have a deal secured, but it's not funding for, say, 6 months. With something that short term, we can use something as simple as a high interest savings ETF, which is safe and secure, can still get a reasonable rate of return, keep up with inflation. That's probably the easiest case for us to deal with. And the nice thing about coming to Justwealth for an FHSA is that we can draw from any of our 80 portfolios to use them, depending on what the purpose is. So someone for, a 1 to 3 year time horizon, they say, I'm not sure if it's going to be in 2 years or in 3 years, but I'm pretty sure it'll be within that 3 year time frame. We could use our target date portfolios that we use for our ESPs, similar to when a child knows he's going to be going to school or she's going to school in 3 years. We would use our target date portfolio dated 3 years in the future. It's an analogous argument to use it for an FHSA. You're going to need it in 3 years. We're going to not take too much risk, but allow you to get as much return as possible while expecting to take it out in 3 years. So it's aligned appropriately from a risk perspective. For those people that think, well, I know I want a house, maybe they're still students and it's not going to be for 5 or 10 years. We can choose any one of our standard risk portfolios. So perhaps a balanced growth portfolio where you put it at an average level of risk, not trying to hit a home run with your money. You don't want to have to downsize in the future because of bad stock market returns and buy a condo instead of a single detached home. But you could take a reasonable amount of risk. And as it becomes closer and closer, more apparent that, maybe it's now 1 to 2 years, then you can shift to something more conservative. So it really is an individual case-by-case basis, and we'll use whatever portfolios we think are most appropriate.
Okay. It's interesting. Just the other day, I read an article in the Globe and Mail about the performance of robo-advisors. They had a pretty good year. And Justwealth is I guess, called a robo-advisor. It's not like computers do that kind of stuff. But what gives robo-advisors an advantage in a good year and why?
Yeah, so I think I can't remember exactly what the title was, but it was despite a difficult year, it's been a great year for robo-advisors, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, a lot of it just has to do with the magnitude of the numbers. Based on the timing of the release, everybody that was in the survey had a double-digit return, positive return. So that is a good year. If you look at longer-term performance, that's difficult to sustain. So it was an exceptionally good year, and it comes after a difficult 2022. So it is kind of welcome news. But in terms of, you know, why robo advisors did well, some did better than others. I'm happy to report that Justwealth for the third consecutive year was the top performing long-term robo advisor. So I'd like to think that's not an accident. Um, so we're quite proud of that. But some other robo advisors didn't do as well. Even that, if you have a 10% gain, that's great. But if everybody else is up by 12%, it's not that great. So, you really want to read into the numbers a little bit deeper and try and understand what it all means.
No, not to blow your own horn, but you had a pretty good year with your ESG, environment, social, and governance portfolio. First off, how do you select what ESG is, and then how do you manage it?
Yeah, so ESG is an acronym, like yeah, one more acronym for the financial world.
No
It
kidding.
stands for environmental, social, and governance. So it's really just three topics that some people hold near and dear to their heart. And for those people that have a very strong belief system that they want to invest in their views, that ethically they want to be aligned with those principles, safe for the environment, proper governance, and respect for social issues. There are some companies included in the broad indices that might not meet those criteria. So because we use exchange traded funds in all of our portfolios, ESG is no exception, we have to use ones that are qualified or designed in a way to meet those criteria. So the ETF providers create them, and there's probably, I don't know, 60 or 70 different ones that any Canadian can choose from. So we screen the entire universe and try to pick the ones with the most strict criteria. So some will use a relative approach, like we'll just take the best in every category, which means we might allow in some questionable companies, but they're just a little bit questionable. The other extreme is no, we don't allow any. If you're in oil and gas, you're in fossil fuels, you're not included. That's the approach that we take. We try to find the ETFs that have the strictest criteria for not allowing anything that falls into those categories. And that way it's the most pure in terms of trying to meet the objective of environmental, social, and governance criteria.
You brought up ETFs that you use at Justwealth, but why wouldn't I just buy a one size fits all ETF? And there's several out there instead of using a robo advisor.
Well, I can't speak to all robo advisors, but specific to Justwealth, I would say there's two reasons why you may not wish to consider an all-in-one or an asset allocation ETF. Number one is performance. So even though Justwealth charges a higher fee than the all-in-one products, we have higher after-fee performance across the board versus all of them over longer periods of time. So by choosing the all-in-one ETF, you would have worse performance, at least historically, compared to Justwealth as an alternative, which has risk comparable portfolios for every single category that they offer. The second reason would be, buying an all-in-one ETF or an asset allocation ETF. It's like going to Home Depot and buying a skill saw. You're buying a product. So if you buy a skill saw thinking I'm going to build a house, you're probably going to make some mistakes and possibly die. You won't have the same experience with an asset allocation ETF, but you can buy a product. It doesn't mean you know what to do with it. It doesn't come with any instructions. You can make mistakes with it as well. You don't know how to use it in the future. You don't know when to make changes. You really are on your own in investing blindly when you're using an all-in-one ETF. And some people say, well, I use the internet for research. Well, would you use the internet to build a home? There's probably going to be some bad advice out there. I'd say probably 90% of the information on the internet when it comes to investing is bad. So it comes with risks attached.
I could spend a whole show on my home renovation accidents. So I know exactly what you're talking about there. Okay, then how should an investor actually compare robo-advisors?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if you look at the 5-year numbers, which is the longest term showed in that survey, I mean, it's not a secret. Wealthsimple is the largest robo-advisor in our country. They are the ones with the worst performance in the survey. So more Canadians have made mistakes in investing in robo-advisors as a classic example that people are perhaps not doing their research correct. I mean, when you're looking for any type of help with investing, whether it's a traditional source or a robo-advisor, you want to find someone that you can trust, and you want to look at someone who is not going to give you the worst return. You're making mistakes if that's the result that you're getting. You need to be able to find managers that satisfy the 3 C's, is the way I put it. You want to have something that is low cost. You want to have something that has low conflicts of interest, so people who are not selling you products for the wrong reasons. And you need to find someone that has credibility. You need to get advice from the person that you're going to advice for. Buying based on advertising, which one of our competitors does quite extensively, is not the best reason. So you really have to do homework. Make sure the manager satisfies all of those 3 C's and is someone that you can trust.
James, Andrew, thank you so much.
Our pleasure, Pat.
Thanks, Pat. It was a pleasure.
Andrew Kirkland and James Gautier, Justwealth Financial.